Okay, a couple of points I thought we should now touch upon is one is, I mean, to come back to the relationship and the whole task of building relationships. The question really I'd like to pose is, are Indian companies doing enough to understand the European market or markets within Europe, or are they still sort of, or are they too still sort of reeling under the influence of the US and the US markets, and maybe rightfully so? Can I ask Subhash to start off?
First of all, there are significant differences. As someone who has gone ahead, I mean, we have acquired companies in the US, we've acquired in Europe, and we've seen the way one handles things. Like, let's just talk about something that is inevitable in a transaction of that nature, which is redundancy. Now, the time it takes us to make, let's say, 150 people redundant in the US is probably the same time as it takes to make 20 people redundant in the UK and 1 in France. Believe me, I'm going through one experience right now, which is something very, very similar to that. So the cultural shifts are dramatic. In North America, they're so bottom line focused. It's, they don't even exchange cards; they throw them, right? And so it's just that. Let's get on with the business. Let's discuss things. So I think given that difference, given such significant differences, even within Europe, continental Europe, UK, and so on and so forth, probably the very low level of penetration by Indian companies in those countries shows lack of efforts by Indian companies. It's when it's an extremely difficult proposition. You would look at something that's much easier to go and do. So, and then here is US. I mean, welcoming with all sorts of business opportunities. So I think indeed Indian companies may not be doing all that they should do. It's very difficult, but let me also add one other angle. The world is such that it's not just about India needing a Belgium or India needing a Germany, or it's the other way as well. So maybe those countries also should start taking a little bit more interest in understanding, and probably it's doable, because those are countries that have deep cultural background and history and so on and so forth. So I think it's possible, but it has to be a bit of a two-way effort. It can't just be one way. I mean, just one small example. I mean, when you get on to the discussion in UK, for example, for the first few minutes, you have to go around in circles a little bit before you can go straight to the point. You just can't go straight to the point. It's not done. It's politically incorrect. So, things like that. I mean, one has to, be used to that a little bit. And maybe the other side also has to take a little bit more interest.
I wonder if I were to flip it around and say, when you do business with Indian, what do you do? I mean, you invite them home, give them tea, and maybe day after tomorrow we discuss business.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that. I see Indians are closer to the Americans in that sense with regard to business. That's my. There are clearly two sets here. One is, of course, who would never get down to business. There's another set who, in IT industry, I think it's largely the latter, who really move because probably of the US experience, and they've been taught that that's probably the best way to do business.
Sure. Phil, your leanings are from this issue. I mean, do you think Indian companies are doing enough? Do you think European companies need to do more to step out and work with companies or countries like India?
Well, I actually think the whole of industry needs to step up to a different way of managing its relationships. And actually, from the point of view of whether it's offshored, nearshored, right-shored or something else, I think the world is very, very rapidly changing to actually a global sourcing model. And so it's interesting that this is clearly an IT forum. If I look at the difference between ITO and BPO by country, for instance, ITO almost nothing with Indian companies in Germany, France, the Nordics, etc. BPO is actually building very, very rapidly without the same kind of barriers. And in some ways it's to do with the culture of IT people, and it's the culture of IT people not just within India. I'm not being pejorative. It's actually IT people around the globe that want to do little bits of technology stuff, want to do exciting things with new tools and new toys, but actually aren't that business focused and are away from having real business relationships to get results, rather than an implementation schedule to actually put something into play within a company. So I think from the point of view of how companies view all of their supply set, how they view relationships, and I go back to this, don't expect to have a deep relationship with someone that you're a commodity supplier for, or else you're back in North America. That has to change within European businesses. The whole issue of governance, about communication, about sharing things, about being open to new ideas, about being honest with yourself, about your goals and objectives, that has to change. The historic management style of having the ambition of doing your predecessor's job 5% better than he did can never last into the future. We're facing times now fueled by things like the growth in India and China and Vietnam. From an economic point of view, we're facing times that have been different and will be acceleratingly, fundamentally different from anything in the past. If we expect to take today's behaviour from a relationship and a governance and a communication point of view into the future, then we're all actually going to fail.
Martin, your sense of, or the sort of UK view or the Welsh view on relationships and who needs to work more on?
Yeah, take the point about our Indian companies doing enough. I think the simple answer to that is some are, some aren't, and certainly from what we see. I'd touch on Phil's point from earlier about the perception that India is just a low-cost option with labour arbitrage, etc. I do see that changing. You're getting far more feedback from the instigators of contracts in the UK that the people who are meeting the SLAs, the people who are adding value to the contracts, are far more and more the Indian operations that are part of a contract delivery process. And I think there's more recognition creeping throughout British business, British industry, that that's the case. So it's not always being looked at as a low-cost option anymore, and I think that's got to be good for both of us. One of the questions that we're asked probably the most often by Indian companies is particularly those of a small and medium size, is where do we get our first contract from? Because we can see the potential in Europe, we can see the potential for doing business there, but we're not of a size and we're not of a capability to go for the 15, 20, 30, 40 million pound contracts over a short term. And I think to come back to a question that was asked earlier, that's where the synergy, the partnership approach should come in. And maybe that's the sort of thing that organisations such as ours can possibly assist with, because there are contracts coming out both from the private sector but particularly perhaps the public sector that are ideal for that type of small medium company who are in a position of growth and looking to penetrate that market. And I think with the right attitude from both parties, then there's a lot of potential left.